Let's take a gander at the old fantasy basketball waiver wire. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and we're going to have a guest appearance later on by Charlie the Unicorn. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Blue Sky at joshloyd.bsky.social, on Twitter at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, use the code LOCKEDONNBA, and get $20 off your first purchase. Also, check out LockedOnDaily.com. That is where you're going to find the newsletter, the best newsletter, the only newsletter that matters for your favorite team. Sign up at LockedOnDaily.com. Welcome to you, double bangers, and let's talk about the fantasy basketball waiver wire. Before the second day of NBA Cup games, again, let me quickly remind you guys. Yes, games are going to be scheduled on Saturday. Extra games are going to be scheduled on Sunday. And yes, they are going to count for fantasy. And yes, that is Yahoo. And yes, that includes ESPN. And yes, all of that counts. There is so much misinformation out there at the moment from people who just don't know and are claiming to know what they're talking about for people in leagues. Again, I will stress this to you. There will be 2 games on Saturday. And there will be 2 additional games added on Sunday. Yes? Everything else is set. There are 2 games to be added onto Saturday. There are 2 games to be added onto Sunday. And they are going to count for fantasy. And that is it. There are no additional games anywhere else that are going to be added anywhere. And I know there are people who still find this very confusing. The Bucks will play the winner of New York and Atlanta on Saturday. The Magic will play the loser of Atlanta and New York on Sunday. The Thunder will play the winner of Golden State and Houston on Saturday. The Mavericks will play the loser of Golden State and Houston on Sunday. And that's it. They're the only games that need to be scheduled. And you know what they're going to happen either Saturday or Sunday. You know what is happening. And they are going to count in fantasy. I 100% guarantee you. And if you don't believe me, that's okay. You'll just be wrong. Let's talk about the fantasy basketball waiver wire now. Let's go through and have a look at what sort of things have been going on. We did get an update on Scottie Barnes. Maybe we'll talk about that first. Looks like he's avoided a Lisfranc injury, which is good. That they've said reevaluation in a week with an ankle sprain. The expectation, it does seem from the Raptors, that it's not going to be a week, that it's going to be 2 to 3 weeks. So probably we're looking Christmas, New Year return for Barnes. The problem here is Barnes has been playing as a point guard. Their other point guard, Emmanuel Quickley, is out. So I would expect that this means that Davion Mitchell starts, because I don't really know what other option they have. So it's more usage for Dick. It's more usage for Barrett. It's more minutes and security for Agbaji. It's probably a little bit more for Olynyk. But again, remembering that Barnes is playing as a point guard. All of his minutes are not coming as a point guard. So there are extra minutes for Agbaji and Olynyk there, and eventually like Bruce Brown and Mobo and those sort of guys. But the majority of the moment of Barnes' minutes are coming as a point guard, meaning Davion Mitchell pushes up. And then you don't care about Davion Mitchell outside of a very, very random assists and steals type stream guy. I wish they would just try Jamal Shed there, but that's not going to happen. Also, that doesn't necessarily mean we get more Jacoby Walter, because Jacoby Walter, by the way, Gary Trent III, his numbers this season are so wildly different from his numbers in college. He's shooting fewer threes in the NBA than in college. His 2-point percentage is like 15 percentage points higher. His assist rate is like 60% higher. His rebound rate is up, but his 3-point shooting is like way down. He's just playing as a different player at the moment, which is very weird. Anyway, that's beside the point. So I don't know where he sort of fits in, because he won't play the point guard minutes. He's not playing the power forward minutes. So who else is playing that point guard role on this team? Like, does RJ Barrett do it? Like, that's pretty yuck. I don't know. There is, and I'll talk about it later on a bit in the show as well, but there are obviously fallouts there from the Scottie Barnes injury. Let's talk about the most added players on the fantasy basketball waiver wire over the last differing time periods, according to which side I'm getting this data from. And on Basketball Monster, using our advanced roster metric, the most added player is Timothy John McConnell. There is a large portion of chasing with those first two names on there. That's TJ McConnell and BJ Boston, because the last time they both played, they put up gigantic numbers. And those numbers aren't going to hold like that. I've got absolutely no problem with McConnell being added. He should be added. He probably should have been added a few weeks ago. We talked about him as a consistent value stream and an option to have in 12-team leagues for multiple weeks now. And it will probably end eventually when Neesmith and Shepherd return. But they're not, so that's okay. So McConnell, that's fine. BJ Boston, again, people added him with the expectation that with Brandon Ingram out, he would do a ton of stuff. And the first game, he scored really well. I don't think that it's going to be a 12-team relevant player, even though that first game was, because he shot 64%. That's okay if you added him there. I'm just not certain that's going to hold, and I'm very unconfident that it will. The most added players on Yahoo. Yahoo uses a 24-hour reporting period here, so these are just stream guys added to play today's game for the Houston Rockets, and they're both Rockets players. And the second name on that list is actually stunning to me. The first name is Dylan Brooks, who is the stream legend. It's him and it's Jaden McDaniels. These are the two guys, Lou Dort. They're always available, and you always add them and you always drop them. But the second name there is Tari Eason. Why was he dropped everywhere? I know why, because people are completely impatient. But the second most added player is Tari Eason. The fact that he's available in enough leagues to be the second most added player is craziness. So anyway, that just means that, hey, go and have a look, because Tari Eason might be available in your league, which is crazy. Again, he is back and he is playing today, but yeah, that's weird. The most added players over on Fantrax, which uses a 7-day reporting period. Number one there is Cole Anthony. Now, obviously, he was terrible yesterday. He shot, 15% or something? He played only 15 minutes. Remembering, though, the game before, he had 16 points or whatever it was in 29 minutes. The Magic now have one game in the next 7 days. Anthony's got a lot of fluctuation here in terms of the role he's going to play, so there's no reason that you have to hold him. Their next game is on Sunday as well, so you got Thursday, Friday, Saturday with no game. So if you want to move on, do it. Totally cool. And the second most added player is Gary Trent, and we know what Gary Trent is. Gary Trent's a player that can hit threes, he can occasionally get steals, and he can usually be terrible. And that puts him into that large grouping of players who are three-point streamers and never considered must roster and not considered, they're always considered stream guys, and you just never know what you're going to get, really, at any point from blokes like that, and that is probably not going to change anytime soon. The most drop players. If you use Basketball Monster there, the number one there is Gershon Yabusele, who played limited minutes last game. That doesn't mean that he'll play those limited minutes every game, but there's also absolutely no need to hold him as a must-roster guy. When Embiid misses, you can stream him back in. That's okay, but move on. All good. And the second most drop player is Dalton Knecht. Again, that makes a ton of sense. The minutes are down. He's a points and threes guy that requires big minutes and big efficiency, and he's not always going to get it, so see you later. The two most dropped players on Yahoo are guys that were streamed in for yesterday. Cole Anthony and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Totally cool. Absolutely the fine and right and correct and totally reasonable decisions to drop both of those players. So absolutely no worries with doing that. It's always going to be somewhat dependent on just how your team looks and what you're trying to achieve this week. But yeah, do that, no worries. And then we go to Fantrax for the most dropped players. This is over the last 7 days. The most dropped player actually on Fantrax was Alfred Payton, but I wasn't going to talk about him because he's not in the NBA anymore, but I am talking about him now, so I guess that didn't really work, did it? So instead, I'll talk about the next guy, the pencil, Harrison Barnes. Barnesy! Yeah, we know what Barnes is. He's a guy that will have the occasional explosion. He'll the guy that have 4 points in 22 minutes. And there's a team with a lot of rotation concerns and queries and unknowns at the moment in San Antonio. The next most dropped player on Fantrax is Moussa Diabate, and that is totally reasonable as well. And that's going to get worse for him when both Richards and Williams are playing, which will be the next game. And then when Miles Bridges is back, it's going to get even more confusing for his role. But thank you for your service, my guy. We just don't need you anymore, unfortunately for you. We're going to come back and talk about more waiver wire stuff. But today's episode is brought to you by the old Game Time app. And most importantly, it's brought to you by Game Time Picks, which makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. It filters out all of the fluff over on Game Time to show you only the incredible deals on the seats that are available for that event that you want to go to. So you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You can go on there and it just shows you, hey, these are the good ones. Good spots, good value, good pricing. That's just the tip of the iceberg of what Game Time provides, of course. You've got the views from your seat, so when you see Game Time picks, select out a seat for the event that you want to go to, then you can click on that seat and you can see what you're going to see from sitting in that spot. There's a lot of S's in that sentence, but that's okay, because we're all about getting the right seats and the right value for these tickets to these events that we want to go and see. You've also got the lowest price guarantee, where Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find that same seat or that same ticket in the same row on another site that's cheaper. You get 110% of the difference back. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create the account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create the account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. All right, let's go through a little bit more waiver wire stuff right now. And I've got a couple of names here. And the first name on this list for a must roster is one that I was a little bit hesitant to do, but I think maybe we just do it. And that is Cason Wallace. The old Hong Kong mattress himself is putting up huge steal numbers at the moment. But the most important thing, and I detailed this on yesterday's show, is that the minutes feel more secure. We are getting 27 or 28 minutes in nearly every game at the moment. He sort of kicked out Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins from challenging for that position. He is providing very strong out-of-position rebounds, the occasional 3-4 assist game, but it's just like 2-3 steals a game. He's hitting some threes. He's scoring okay. He's doing enough. Now, this is more catered towards category leagues than points leagues. In a points league, he's more of a fringe stream guy. In the short term, while Chet is out, which is going to be long term, but I think while we've got a level of some confidence that Wallace is going to be a 27-minute-a-night player, and if that pushes to be a consistent 30-minute-a-night, then we are absolutely locked in as a must-roster guy. So some of this is like, hey, he's done well. Some of this is like, hey, let's get ahead of it, and because if it stays at 30, then we're going to have some real value here. And some of it is just like, I'm not sure there's many other superb options out there as guys that we need to grab. And you get the benefit here of a game coming up on Saturday for the Thunder. So I've got Cason Wallace on that list. And the other one I do have there is Julian Champagnie. While the Spurs continue to play him huge minutes, and it is very weird that Champagnie is getting more minutes now, even though Sohan and Vassell are back. Because he was getting sometimes he played 25 or 26 earlier in the season, and now he's playing 32, 33. As we've got this sort of weird change from fast bowling legend Mitch Johnson limiting Sohan down and keeping Vassell at 28 minutes while pumping 34 into Champagnie and Castle. So while that is happening, then yeah, Julian Champagnie, old Buble, he's worth a crack for us at the moment. I don't think that it's going to hold. Something is going to give. It feels unlikely to me that we will get 50 combined minutes a game between Vassell and Sohan, which is what we're getting at the moment, and someone is going to lose out. It could be Barnes. It might not be. It could be Castle. It might not be. It could be Champagnie. It might not be, but we don't know. So at the moment, we go through with Julian Champagnie, and we use him, and we value that and all that stuff, and then later on, we'll see where it goes. I'm going to throw out a bunch of names. Again, understanding the verbiage of what droppable means is important. I'm not going to explain it. You can figure it out. All these guys, we're talking standard formats, are droppable players. Denny Avdia. He's not playing enough. Plays like 24, 25 minutes. He's also not good enough to be a player in those minutes to be must roster. When Avdia is useful for fantasy, he's a 30-plus minute player who's a second offensive option. And he's neither of those things, and unless multiple things change in Portland, he won't be either of those things. So I don't think he is worth holding on to. But again, remember the position that I come from. I do not believe in this star upside ability of Denny Avdia that others do. So I'm not going to have the faith that he's going to kick other players out of the role and he's going to develop and feel... I don't believe any of that. So understand when I'm telling you that I don't see Avdia doing this, backed by years of data, by the way, that I don't see him doing that stuff. So I don't believe that Denny is a must-roster player. And therefore, he is droppable. Klay Thompson and Dante DiVincenzo. What are they? They are 3-point streaming former Warriors that play for different teams that have been overrated at times this season. Less so Klay, more so Dante. There'll be times when they are way better than this and you can use them, and there are times, like now, which you just don't have to have them on your roster. I'll also throw Rui Hachimura on there because he still has an absolutely ridiculous level of people loving him, and I do not get it. And yes, why did I say it that way? Too many What We Do in the Shadows episodes recently for me, which is a show, by the way, that I'd never watched until this recent season. And I probably need to go back and watch all of it. But anyway, Rui Hachimura gets way too much love. The last game for him was very good, and that was because there was no LeBron or Austin Reeves. And we have seen this for time and time and time and time again. Rui Hachimura is a mid-range merchant who needs 35 minutes, outsized usage, and for the shots from mid-range to go in at a level that is unsustainable. Because he doesn't do anything else. And yeah, the last game with no LeBron there was fine. But is that going to be an ongoing thing? Now, to be fair, LeBron missed practice today and he was away for the team from personal reasons, so I don't really know what's going on there. And I hope everything's all right with LeBron. But I don't have any faith in Rui as a must-roster guy. Therefore, he is droppable. I got Terry Rozier on this list as well. And that's probably the one I feel least confident about. He has been bad all season. He could easily turn into a larger role. Spoelstra does change things up a lot. We're hearing all these rumblings of the Jimmy Butler trade again, which is something that I've talked about for a long time, about the disconnect between Butler and the Heat all through the offseason. It was something that I hinted at last season as well, which was something that I couldn't actually say out loud. I was told not to talk about it, about the fracture between those two camps. And Butler, I don't know that he gets traded or not, but I know that the idea of those two teams, Heat Miami and Jimmy together, is not something that they all feel is a long-term solution. I also don't think Butler's going to get traded this season. But if he did, that would impact what happens with Rozier, but it might not necessarily mean that he becomes awesome because, as we all know, when you're trading, something else has to come back. And I'm guessing if you're giving up a Jim Butler, you're getting back someone who you'd think can play, I guess, most of the time. Anyway, Rozier is so fringy to me that if you've got him, sure, no worries, all good. If you don't, also, who cares? I think that's sort of where we sit in standard formats. And the last name there, I think, is an obvious one. It's Brandon Podziemski. If they start him and play him 30 minutes, I'm interested. We get ahead of it. But when they push him back down, you drop, you move on. Who cares? One of the biggest propaganda situations of all time from him in the preseason, taking 8 to 10 threes a game. And look, I got part of that wrong, very clearly, because I was like, there's no way he's taking 8 to 10 threes. That is garbage. Ignore that. That is not happening. So that was 100% correct. But my thing was, the fact that he said that meant that they were going to have confidence in playing him 32, 33 minutes a night, because the only way he'd be able to even get close or imagine that being a possibility was if he played 32, 33 minutes a night. And of course, that lasted for the foreseeable future. So, that lasted a game. And he didn't play anymore, and we move on from Brandon Podziemski. And if things change and he starts again and plays 32 minutes, then we re-add him. And I think he's just going to be one of those guys that's pumped and dumped all season long. That's how it's feeling. What about some guys who are hot, who are rolling through the top 100 over the last week? You'll see two top 40 players there that are pretty okay, that's interesting. Number one is Leaky Beasley. This man, if you want to talk about Klay Thompson and Dante DiVincenzo and Gary Trent or AJ Green or Terry Rozier or Duncan Robinson or whoever you want, right? Beasley's doing that, but he's doing it well. Now, he has actually, for a guy that's been as incredibly streaky as Leaky, streak for leak, he has been unbelievably consistent somehow this season. There was one absolute turd about 3 games ago, but he bounced straight back. He's making Tim Hardaway look embarrassingly bad. I find it very hard to trust Malik Beasley because I've seen Malik Beasley play for years and years and years. But there was a 2-month stretch when I believe it was when he was traded from Denver to Minnesota post-trade deadline, where he was rolling as a top 70 fantasy guy for a prolonged period of time. So, yeah, he's hot now, and he's been hot for a period of time, and I don't trust it. I think it can fall at any point, but maybe. Royce O'Neal's there, and Grayson Allen's there, 37th for Royce and 71st for Grayson. That is largely because both Durant and Nurkic are out, and they're both putting up good numbers. I don't think it's a long-term solution. Short-term, no worries. As soon as we see that Durant is back, they become expendable. Doesn't mean you have to get rid of them immediately, but they do become expendable. Justin Champagnie, not Julian, the other one, the old Prosecco himself, Lambrusco legend, Justin Champagnie is the 77th ranked player. And people have been adding him a lot. I don't trust that really at all because, again, it's required so many weird things to happen. Kispert, George, Kuzma, Sarr, all out. And that's meant that every sort of forward-eligible player, even Patrick Baldwin, weren't available to play. And Champagnie played, and he played really well. But there's just no way he's going to be used over Kuzma and over Sarr and over George and even over Kispert, even though he should be used over Kispert. But that's just not going to be a realistic thing. So that's why I haven't really even considered him much of an ad, even though that production's been very good. Al Horford has been the 80th ranked player per game over the last week. Horford is available in so many spots. And I understand why people have dropped him, especially in points leagues. And the return of Porzingis does make him more of a stream guy. But yeah, like, just stop. I think we need to stop just ignoring Horford and considering him someone that you can hold on to. You don't have to, but you can. And the last name, there's just one I want to mention in case people get excited. It is the big stiffy Bones Highland, who's had 2 solid games in a row, largely because Kevin Porter and James Harden have been out, and I don't think that's going to be something that moves on as we go forward, and that would mean that Bones is going to go back and play 0 minutes. So it's been a nice little stretch. If you somehow were able to predict that Harden was going to miss that game on Sunday, and that Bones was going to play his 24 minutes or whatever it was and play well, then kudos to you. That's a great pull. It's just not something that has any real staying power, I don't think. Today's episode is also brought to you by the big fellas over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle all of the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Now, right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when you place and win your first $5 bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything that you could possibly need to go in there and place those live bets. All of the live updating stats on that same page as the bets and the odds. All of the live play-by-play on that same page as well. It is there, everything that you need to go and place those live NFL bets. So in the middle of the game, when you get that hunch, you can check that all out on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. So go to FanDuel.com right now, join today, and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and don't forget to gamble responsibly. Okay, all right. We've got a couple more little segments to go here. Let's just talk about some guys who I think have got some injury value here. And number 1 on that list is Ochai Agbaji, who's I'm using as more of a placeholder name because of the Barnes/Quickly injury. When I've done my projections here, there's like 4 Raptors players who all look like they could be between 110 and 140 over this time period. And one of them is Agbaji, one of them is Olynyk, one of them is Davion Mitchell. And was there anyone else? I think they're the 3 guys who go, okay, there's enough like little boost there, but there's still so many unknowns with this team. What if Bruce Brown comes back? What do they do there? Well, actually, the one there is going to be Dick. Like, Dick's the guy you grab with Barnes out, and I think, because we've talked about the shortcomings of Dick, in that if the main guys are there, we just don't get enough. He doesn't get enough in terms of touches and shots, and he doesn't do enough other things. But if Barnes and Quickly are both out, well, you're going to get Dick as the number 2 option there for the Raptors. So he's going to do enough. So he's the priority. But then you get into an Agbaji, Mitchell, Olynyk, even a Mobo type sandwich. And in the end, I think it's going to be one of those ones very similar to in Orlando, where it's just like a random bunch of like, maybe it's him today, maybe it's him today, maybe it's him today. Again, I think that Mitchell's going to get the biggest bump in production in terms of from where he was to where he might be. Doesn't mean that he's a 12-teamer. Agbaji's probably someone useful. I still don't have full faith in him, though. And Olynyk really is the wild card there. While LaMelo Ball and Trey Mann are out in Charlotte, we just keep rolling with Vasilije Micic because he is the guy who is the point guard, and getting assists can be tough to do. He's also shot the ball better. He's scoring okay. To me, he's a very clear guy to roster at this point. Also, Ayo Dosunmu. Dosunmu does probably need 2 guys out to be a guaranteed must-roster guy. At the moment, the only guy out is Patrick Williams, so that's affording Dosunmu those opportunities to start. It doesn't mean that his usage goes up because White and Levine are still there and Vooch is still there. The thing that did change today, though, is that Josh Giddey left practice early for the Bulls with some back concerns. So if he is out and Patrick Williams is out, although Williams might return, that means more ball handling abilities or ball handling opportunities for Dosunmu. So that's probably what he needs. He's also doing a lot of stuff that's well above expectation in terms of shooting. But Dosunmu is a guy that when those injuries occur, he's there. I've got Mason Plumlee on this list while Nurkic is out. Plumlee's not going to blow you away, but he might get a block, he might get double-digit boards, he might have 60% field goals, and that might be enough. If you didn't grab a Goga Badadze or someone along those lines and you're looking for low-end center production, that's what Plumlee can do in the very, very, very short term. I'm also putting Brandon Clark on this list. Zach Edey's still not back. Clark is doing enough most nights. You've got Jay Huff there for the deeper leagues also. But Clark is doing enough just to be useful, and especially in periods of time where Memphis has a schedule advantage, I do like using Clark there. And the last name on that list is Mr. Black, who was really good last game, Anthony Black. The game before, you probably don't want to look at that if you're an Anthony Black fan because it was terrible. And I think that's going to be the concern with him and Anthony, and throw De Silva in that mix as well, or KCP, or Jed Howard. It's going to be sort of mix and match. Black's got the ability to do assist, steals, and blocks. Anthony's got the ability to be points and threes with some assists. So it's just sort of different groups there. And I just think Jamal Mosley is going to try different options. I still have way more faith in Cole Anthony being able to generate shots for him and his teammates versus what Black can do. But it was a good performance from Anthony Black last time out. So have a crack at it, but I would have very little faith in that considering he's had opportunities all season and he's still not a top 200 player. Lastly, just a bunch of other names that I think are worth talking about because John Kuminga is starting at the moment for the foreseeable future, and he is solid, right? Well, that's not true. He has been solid the last 2 games. I'll be very interested to see what the Warriors do today with Andrew Wiggins returning. Do they just start Draymond at center? What are they going to do? Are they going to start like Draymond back on the bench? Does Kuminga go? I don't know. I don't know how to believe anything that Steve Kerr says. If Kuminga's a bench player, very hard to use him. If Kuminga's starting, more interesting. But what he needs to be able to do, and last game he did it, was bring the defensive stuff and bring the defensive stats and bring the efficiency, which he doesn't usually do. But for now, while he's starting, allegedly, we go with it. Bilal Coulibaly has been terrible for about 3 to 4 weeks, except the last game gave me a little bit of hope. Nothing really to do with the shooting, but he just sort of did, and he did shoot better. But just doing the little things, some more steals, more blocks, more assists. The role for him feels feels very secure, and that's a positive. And I do think if you've got him, it's okay, and if you don't, it's also okay. If he's on the wire, whatever. But there was a slight sign of a turnaround there. Put Yves Missi on this list. While Ingram and Zion are out, Missi's value is higher. He doesn't get squeezed for smaller lineups because they don't have the personnel for the smaller lineups. When both of those guys are back, we did see it that when Ingram was playing, even though Zion was out, that they squished Missi down a bit because they went small to get Trey Murphy in there, but they don't have that problem now. So Missi's numbers are likely to be up, and he is a guy to roster for now at least. Asar Thompson on this list, I don't believe you should be rostering him. It is a long path for him to get to 12-team relevance, and I just don't think it's going to be worth it. Kelly Oubre Jr. is continuing to start over Jared McCain. He's also providing a lot of defensive stats at the moment. His usage is not so high, but he grabbed, I think, double-digit rebounds in the last one. As you're well aware, I do not love Kelly Oubre as a fantasy player, but for the time being, I think it's okay and just sort of adjusting where it goes. And the last name on that list continues to be Juice McBride. The Knicks, they're playing today, so stream him in. He's got that value in that if there are four different players who can get hurt, we'll see his minutes rise, and he's already getting 27 a night anyway. I think he's a 12-team league hold in the majority of cases, but it might not work for you. You might need a little bit more. You might value the streaming spot over him, which I totally understand as well. He's sort of a back-end stash with sort of value type play, which is a very wordy way of saying something that I'm sure there's an easier way of saying. The easy way for me to say it now, though, is that the show is done. The show is over. And we'll be back with a preview of Thursday's 3 games in the NBA. In the meantime, hit the thumb on this video. And if you subscribe and hit the notification bell, well, you'll never miss when that show comes out. You'll see it immediately. It'll be there. And then we're ready to go. Guys, be positive about your fantasy team. Be positive about the things you do in your life and understand that even if you do something bad, even if you do something wrong, you've done things correctly. You've done things well. No one's perfect, and no one's always incorrect. Look at the good. Focus on the good. Highlight the good. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.